All right, guys. So hopefully this Prezi is going along nicely for you. It's kind of the basics of the age of exploration. The age of exploration, of course, impacted what is now the United States of America, but the age of exploration was really a global historic event because of the impact that it had on countries really all around the world. Of course, the main ones being located in Europe, but eventually the age of exploration is going to impact some African nations, and it's also going to impact some nations in North America and South America. So let's go over some review. Basically, all I'm going to do is the notes that you've taken so far is I'm going to go back over the little review sections to help review and refresh. So if you remember, the age of exploration began in the 1400s, and this is when you have all these different countries who are sending explorers from Europe to the Americas to create colonies. Creating colonies is called colonization. So the countries involved, or the main countries involved, in exploration and colonization of the Americas were Portugal, Spain, France, and England. Now, some of the important leaders during the age of exploration are Prince Henry from Portugal and Isabella and Ferdinand from Spain. Isabella and Ferdinand are going to be the ones that finance the trip for Christopher Columbus. So, moving along, exploration and colonization occurred because explorers really wanted three things, and if you remember, they're called the three G's: God, gold, and glory. Spread the word of God, obtain glory and fame, find gold, and become rich. There were new innovations that were coming about that made exploration a little bit easier. One was the compass, which is a device that uses the Earth's magnetic forces to show direction. It has two parts, a needle and a dial. And then there's the astrolabe, a device that sailors use to determine the latitude of a ship. So this really kind of helped sailors determine where they are. If you've ever heard of the expression, "where on earth am I?" Well, this is something that allowed sailors to do that. The caravel was a ship developed by the Portuguese that could sail fast and had sails that could be used to steer the ship. So not only now are these ships going to be faster, which is nice because they have a long way to go, but they're also going to be a little bit more maneuverable. All right, moving on. As a result of the age of exploration, we start to see something called cultural diffusion, is when you have one culture that influences another one. The Columbian Exchange was the exchange or trade of goods and other things, such as diseases between the European explorers and the Native Americans in North and South America. So the Columbian Exchange is really a vast example of cultural diffusion. A lot of cultural diffusion occurred during the Columbian Exchange through trade of good and exposure of new diseases. The exchange of goods, such as the potato, helped Europe. This was something that really swept through Europe, and a lot of people really enjoyed these. And it also had some health benefits. Some of the negatives here: the exposure of diseases killed off many Native Americans. Almost 90% of Native Americans that came in contact with European explorers died from diseases. Cultural diffusion, as an example of the potato and diseases, you can see it has good and bad results. And the last thing that we're going to review is this little flow chart here. At the top, it clearly says the age of exploration, and then cultural diffusion. And here's a couple of examples of cultural diffusion or impacts that cultural diffusion has. First is the Columbian Exchange. Okay, now it exposed Europe to the Americas, and the Americans did not react very well because the Europeans brought over these new types of diseases. Americas to Europe was the potato. Americas introduced the potato to Europeans, and this was definitely a positive thing. The triangular trade. This was where this was the slave trade. You had Europe to Africa. So the exchange of goods between Europe and Africa, you had liquor, cotton, and weapons. And then the exchange of goods from the Americas to Europe are plantation goods, stuff that was produced on these large plantations by slaves. And then Africa to the Americas, this is where the slaves were brought over from Africa to the Americas. So you can really see a lot taking place just because countries began to explore and send explorers out to look for new land and look for new resources and began to colonize. It really does lay the foundation of the United States.